Today I sat down with Dan Baker, a highly accomplished home cook, to find out his thoughts on buffalo and its uses as a food source. Tell me your name and what you want to talk to me about today.
My name is Dan Baker, and I'm here to speak with you about bison, or the American buffalo, as a food source.
What part of the buffalo do we usually eat?
We eat a lot of the buffalo. Outside of the innards being really commercially viable, I think that we get a lot of the ribs and steaks, and a lot of it's ground and can be used just like ground beef and substituted, and often is. The big thing with ground beef is that it has a higher fat content than bison. So a lot of people that are relatively health conscious are going to be dabbling in bison as a food source.
Do you have any tips on how to prepare bison meat?
Yeah, bison can be prepared a lot of similar ways as beef. Ground bison can be substituted in recipes almost directly, and the biggest difference is that it has a lower fat content. So you want to be careful not to take the temperatures too high when you're grilling and things like that, or else you'll cook a lot of the fat right out of the meat and you'll get a dry taste. When you're doing steaks and roasts, you're going to definitely want to braise or do some sort of moist cooking method to retain some of the juiciness that's within the meat. Really, you can do hamburgers or anything else without changing the recipe, but it is recommended not to cook it too much over 145, or else you'll probably get a relatively dry bison burger.
How does the flavor of bison compare to regular cattle meat?
I would say bison is typically more robust flavor than most pastured beef, just because they are raised primarily on grass and sedges that they were naturally grazing on back before their species was annihilated by humans.
Do you know much about Native Americans and their relationship with buffalo?
I know that the bison was basically their main food source, and they used every bit of the animal, from the bones to the sinew to the hair to the pelts. Everything about the animal was utilized, and they wasted very little. Today it's a little bit different, since it's usually marketed as a food source for the most part, and that's really what it's being raised for at this point.
What can you tell me about the buffalo's habitats?
Buffalo have historically ranged from the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachians, and from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico here, and that's strictly representing the North American buffalo. They pretty much, the Great Plains, anywhere where there's tall grasses, they're a pretty key part of the ecosystem, because they beat down a lot of the grasses, and things like prairie dogs like to live in those areas because they don't have to basically be shrouded in tall grass, and they can actually see their enemies coming about. So they did a lot for different animals also in the areas that they roamed.
With bison meat sort of on the rise, how is that working with their current population? Has the population risen?
To my knowledge, there's about 200,000 bison in the United States, and I believe most of those are ranched out in North and South Dakota. So a lot of the traditional grazing lands is also where ranchers tend to raise them, just because it's fantastic habitat for that species.
Do you have any final thoughts on buffalo?
It's a great food source. I think that compared to beef, I believe there's about 125,000 cows killed per day for meat and food source, and compared to about 20,000 bison that are slaughtered every year. So you are going to pay a little bit more because it is a little less of a popular commodity at this point. But I think that the value is well worth it when you're dealing with a lower fat, very nutrient dense meat that has great flavor.
Thanks for talking with us today.
Thank you. My name is Dan Baker, and I love to cook. One of the things I love to cook is bison. Bison is great. It is fantastic. It's really neat. People like bison. People like me. I like people that like bison.